Good morning. I've already spoken to you about a couple of the rocks in the Bible, and we're actually going to spend a couple more days in the wilderness with Moses regarding rocks, because there are some other rocks that are kind of interesting out there. Today I'm going to deal with two rocks, actually. We already talked about Jesus being the foundation for all of life and all of understanding. The other thing is, we have already talked about God being the rock who gave all the provisions to Israel during their time in the wilderness, where it talks in Deuteronomy 32 about honey from the rock. But after Israel left Egypt, remember, they had been slaves in Egypt for a long time and they were finally free. But their appreciation for their freedom didn't last long, so what ended up happening is they began to complain almost immediately. Now, you realize that as they were going through the territory outside of Egypt, because Egypt was pretty lush and very, very nice, but what happened is when they got into the wilderness, this is part of the wilderness that they wandered through. When I was in Egypt and Jordan and Israel just over a year ago, we had a chance to go through this, and all of us who were on the tour kept looking at the wilderness and going, no wonder they complained. Well, anyhow, they complained, and of course one of the primary complaints they had was, we're thirsty and we want water. And they were going through this brown, deserted, forbidding area that seemed to go on forever. And even when we were driving on a bus, it seemed like it lasted forever. But what happened is, God said to Moses, stand in front of them and hold the staff that you used when you were in front of Pharaoh. And he said, stand in front of the people and then strike the rock. And when you strike the rock, I'll bring forth water. And God did. And that place was called two different things. It was called Massa and Meribah. Or in English, it would be testing and quarreling. So that's what it was called. Now remember, the next place we're going to get to, remember those names, all right? Massa and Meribah, which is testing and quarreling. During that time, as they were going through the wilderness, God provided them with manna, He provided them with quail, He provided them with water, He provided them with clothes that would not wear out, but everything that He provided, they said thank you, and then seems like almost immediately they began grumbling again. So as you go through this time in the wilderness, they eventually get to Numbers chapter 20, where once again, they're in this same type of territory, and what happened is the people said, we are thirsty. Why can't you give us water? And now I realize this may not be a great picture. I'm not sure how it's going to come across for you, but this is, according to some, this is the actual rock that Moses was going to be used by God to bring water from in that area around Sinai. But in Numbers chapter 20, what was happening is they were saying, oh, Egypt was so wonderful. Remember, God had taken them out of slavery, and their slavery in Egypt was not good. But in the middle of a tough time, they looked back even at slavery and said, oh, it was so nice to be back in Egypt where we had pomegranates and we had fruit and we had all these things. And so God said to Moses, stand in front of the people, in front of this rock, speak to the rock. Now, the other time He had said, strike the rock. But this time, God said, speak to the rock. But Moses was so mad at the people that what he did is he took the staff and he said, you want water? And he smacked the rock. Now, God still did give water to the people. The rock split open and water came out, enough to feed the millions of people and their animals. This place in Numbers chapter 20 was also called Meribah, which means quarreling. So the other one is Massa and Meribah. This one is just Meribah. But God said to Moses, because you struck the rock, because you did not trust me to answer, you don't get to lead the children of Israel into the promised land. Wait a minute. Moses, after 40 years of leading them through the wilderness, because he lost his temper and because he struck the rock instead of speaking to it, he doesn't get to go into the promised land? Yes, that's actually right. Now, we don't see Moses' heart. God did. But there are a couple lessons we should learn from this. Remember, Moses had been serving God and doing wonderful things for him. And later on, he was also considered to be one of the godly men. But at that point, Moses did not finish strong. You and I need to be concerned. You and I need to do what we can to make sure that in our faith walk, we finish strong. In our families, in our parenting, in our marriage, we need to finish strong. Now, the thing that got Moses into trouble is when they went through a tough time, he lost it. We're going through a tough time right now. This will reveal the depth and the strength of your faith. Now, God didn't reject Moses, but there was a consequence to what he did that was sin. God may not throw you out. He may not reject you because you don't finish strong. But guess what? When we disobey God, there's a very real chance we will face some consequences. Now, one thing we don't see in the rest of the account that Moses wrote in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, we don't see Moses complaining about the consequences. He just accepted those consequences, realizing that he knew his heart and he knew that he had disobeyed God in front of all the people of Israel. I pray that what you will do is you'll look at your life, you'll look at what God wants from you, and that you'll finish strong, and you'll be like the first rock where Moses obeyed God, not like the second rock where the circumstances made him lose his temper. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about a couple rocks that had some words inscribed on them. God bless.